Let's talk colors.
Chartreuse and why it's the juice.
Oh, if it ain't chartreuse, it ain't no use, right?
Yeah, and if you're in Juneau and you're not fishing Juneau juice, just go home.
Fucking go home.
Yeah,
or just be prepared to catch things because you're not going to catch a big one.
No dinks on pink, right?
That one too.
No, but for real, let's talk colors. Let's see what colors you like to fish in clear water. Let's see what colors we like to fish in dirty water in all different scenarios.
Yes, that's what we want to explain. Why certain colors are better in different situations, and I think you brought up a good one with chartreuse. That's a funny, good way to start because that's a very interesting color. Never seen a baitfish that color.
Never.
Never.
Ever.
Yeah, and I've caught fish with that color on clear water, dirty water. It's all around color. What was that study that we saw about bass?
Yeah, it was something about largemouth bass where it showed they cannot tell the difference between chartreuse or white.
A study that they did on bass fishing. Two things that were highlighted is bass have a very hard time distinguishing between white and chartreuse and blue and black, believe it or not.
Yep. And I always flip a black and blue jig. But yeah, but then again, that's the study they did on bass. We don't know how Snook sees chartreuse or white, so there could be a difference there.
So we have some preferences on why and where we're going to fish chartreuse. You want to elaborate on that? I know you have something that you always stick to, and then I've taken that from what you've done. But
I have two different ways of looking at it. One is I like my bait to naturally blend into its environment. If fishing's really hard, they're a little bit picky. I like my bait to actually blend into the surroundings. That way they can't see it from far. They feel it coming, and then it's right there in their face, and they just react to it.
So when you mean blend in, for people who don't know, like explain that blending. Is it water clarity? Is it the time of year? Is it the type of bait fish around? Like what is the blend?
Water clarity. So let's say you have like a hard northeast wind. The incoming tide's a little milky white. I like to fish a clearish, whitish bait. If you look at it, you see bait running through when the water's milky white. Those baits are white. They actually get wider to blend in and camouflage. And I just think the snook are looking for those baits, and until it's right in their face, they just react to it and hit it. If it's a full-blown bite and they're snapping, they'll hit it in almost any color. But when fishing is tough, I like to try to blend into the surroundings.
So in that particular situation, color matters?
Yeah, I go back to if it's a full-blown bite, if they're snapping, or if you're trying to locate fish, you know they're there and they're not biting. That's when I like the blending in camouflaging technique.
Right.
Yep.
And it's interesting, right? Because it's like the whole $1 million question, right? Does color matter?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like in every certain scenario or certain fishing conditions, you can have where it does matter, or to some people they still, hey, it's the profile, no matter what. It's just the way you were fishing.
And we have seen all scenarios where it's like it'll be pitch black out. They're snapping. I'm just going in my bag grabbing whatever color, and it doesn't matter. And then want. It's like, oh my God, I'm all out of lime cider, and that's it. They won't hit any other color.
And that's the only thing they want.
We've seen that time over time.
Yeah, and speaking of incoming tide with a milky white water, you like the white.
Yep.
But how many times have we seen the chartreuse just completely shine in that situation, right? It's actually, I'm the inverse compared to what you just said. I like to start with the chartreuse and then work on the white. And then certain scenarios, they actually seem to take one or the other. But
100%.
Like you said, B, it's like what's happening in that situation? How are they reacting to it? And then what's going on?
Yeah, always switch it up. That's why we're always switching up colors. I'm always seeing what Jose's throwing. I'm always looking at what Ben's throwing. All right, he's not getting bit. Let me try this. And boom, boom, boom. Then they're looking at me. What color are you throwing? And then you can really dial it in.
Yeah, something about that chartreuse. It does shine in that really white, milky water. So that's kind of been a go-to for years that you've always gone to it. A lot of times Brandon would be fishing it down south, and when that water's stirred up from the beach and you have an incoming and it's white, I've seen it where all they want is what? You know, that or they're eating it 2-to-1, 3-to-1 of what they're doing anything else.
Yeah.
But something about that lime cider and that milky white water. And then just going back to chartreuse, I mean, we've done really well with a chartreuse over a dark contrasting color.
Like the Juneau juice.
Ooh.
In dirty water.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. Or like, what's about that contrasting color that really gets those fish to hone in on it?
It goes back to like when you're fishing a flare hawk, orange head, chartreuse body, red tail. two hard contrasting colors. And it goes the same on a swim bait. If you have a top color that's brown or orange and a belly that's chartreuse, those are two high contrasting colors up against each other. And it doesn't look natural to us at all, but I think once it's in the water, in dirty water, 10, 15 feet down, those are different shades, and those fish are able to distinguish that silhouette of the bait up against a muddy brown contrasting background. I just think they're able to pick it up a little bit further away than they was like a solid white bait or a pink bait or a super clear natural mullet run color. Yep. Just those two hard contrasting colors, they're able to see it a little bit further away.
Yeah, and we're talking dirty water. This
water.
Is not like it has a little tint of brown on it, but maybe 5-10 feet of visibility, if that. End of the outgoing, when they have the spillways open, trying to trick these fish in low visibility conditions. So
two high contrasting colors, or like a purple haze, a solid dark purple. And when we talk about a dark bait, we mean we can hold it up to the light and you can't see any bleed through of the color in. Some of our baits are kind of see-through. You can hold it up to the light and you could see right through it. The water doesn't even need to be super dirty. Like we've seen in certain inlets where crystal clear incoming water, no moon, super dark, and that purple haze is just getting smoked.
They want that silhouette.
Yep.
It's when we're talking dark colors, is exactly what you said. You don't want any light passing through it, and a lot of times that's casting a silhouette. Whenever there's even just the slightest bit of ambient light, sometimes that's when it matters most. When it is very little ambient light and it's really, really dark out. It's very much against, how I thought about it when I was younger, or against popular belief, like people say. But sometimes in the darkest moons, in the darkest areas, in all black, or a very solid color, whether it's purple or black or blue. But as long as you don't have any light bleed through, we've seen that outfish a transparent color 3-4 to 1.
Oh yeah, plenty of times.
So it's you're kind of tying in water clarity with ambient light and trying to find that recipe on what those fish want, what's the silhouette that you're getting to, and what you're going to get the most bites on.
Yep. Like one of our most popular asked questions is, what color do I fish? And I like to tell them, start natural, mullet run, greenback. From there, work down, lime cider or purple haze. That's why our standard colors, we offer a few standard colors. Those colors cover you in most fishing scenarios. We do the limited batches because we get super picky with colors, where we'll make a limited batch. We're like, oh my God, this spot, they're going to smoke it. And we know that color of the water, that scenario, that's what's going to work. But I like to start natural. If you're not getting bit, work your way down from there.
So if you had to,
that's
actually a phenomenal way.
It's such an easy way to just break it down and look at it.
Absolutely. So again, like when people ask you for certain colors in certain areas, what is the kind of the number one thing out for you to start natural? Is it because of the bait fish around, the water clarity? What's like the reasoning behind it?
Yep, it's usually bait fish and water quality. So I ask them, where are you fishing? And they'll say, oh, I'm fishing off a beach. All right, when you're on the beach, water's somewhat clear, if it's not windy or there's a cold front coming through. But clear water, there's going to be pilchards around, little maharas, just a hell yeah butter, which is a plain white with a gold sheen, or a greenback, which mimics a greenback or a pilchard really naturally. And if that's not getting bit, then work your way down. But usually those two colors, you're going to get a bite.
Yeah, I like a simple rule of thumb for me would be clear water, more natural colors. Darker, dirtier water. That's when you're getting into your darker or brighter colors to kind of make that contrasting effect. For the most part, I think the clearer the water, it's kind of what you were talking about earlier. You want to blend that bait in with the water and with the contrasting background to make it a little bit difficult for that fish to see when it's super clear. And then when it's dirty, you kind of want to create the opposite effect, where you want to contrast that bait to the background to get that 5 or 10 feet of visibility out of that fish to try to get a bite. And that dirty water fishing, it's not like clear water where that fish can track it from 10, 15 feet away. If you're not within a 3-4 feet,
2-3 feet away, that's
even
it.
A foot.
Yeah,
they're not moving They're not moving much.
We've seen it the other day. We're fishing during the day. The water was like 6-inch visibility.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the fish on the side scan, and you're casting. And if your lure was not, let's say, 10, 12 inches, a foot away from them, they weren't moving a foot out their way to eat it. You had to literally bring it right in front of them, right on top of them.
And the right way, not lining them or anything like that.
And with the right bait, right?
Yeah.
Let alone color, right?
Yeah.
So you got to make sure you have the right size bait. What are they eating? To make sure it's the
middle
right weight.
Middle of the day, black.
Yeah, they were smoking the black, straight black.
Middle of the day.
Yep.
Wow.
you know.
In that dirty,
That
that
dark-
nasty water, right?
Dark
Yeah.
horse, that dark horse color.
Chocolate
That's like
milk.
one of my favorite colors.
Yeah, that dark horse, gun smoke.
Yep.
That dark gray seems to have. That's kind of the first thing, me personally, I grab. You know, I'm always into the dark colors personally. Those, especially for big fish. If you're talking about hunting giants, it seems to me at least a lot of big personal best catches have been on darker colors, purple. Gunsmoke or dark horse as we call it, murder mullet, etc.
And then Ben, we were talking earlier. I mean, kind of talk about it like what you were saying about fishing throughout the tide, and what colors are you typically fishing throughout the tide?
Yeah, so it's very tidal dependent, and to reiterate too, most of my fishing that we do is at nighttime. So daytime versus night, it's two different tactics of colors. Specifically at nighttime, if I'm starting my evening, let's just say it's a high incoming tide going into an outgoing. So I'm fishing the first of the out, water's clear. The clearest it'll be at that part of the tide, depending on how much wind is going on, the moon positioning, where I'm at. I'll start with, like Brandon said, a white or a chartreuse color, and then I work my way down until I find out what shade or what hue I seem to be getting bit in. To be, again, fully frank too, you guys know me, been fishing with me for a while. I fish pretty much anything mixed. I'll grab two different styles of heads, two different colors. Sometimes I don't even think about it. You know, as long as it, for me, profile is more of a thing, but sometimes color does matter, and in a certain situation it does. So in a perfect scenario, I'll start out in a lighter, you know, the whites and chartreuses, typically depending on the water clarity. If it's gin clear, I do reach into the clear stuff, more translucent colors like natural ice, hell yeah butter, Miami ice. We did a color, I believe, like Miami ice, Palm Beach pearl. That's a killer South Florida color, especially in like, you know, Hall Over, Palm Beach, Boca Inlet, like your typical South Florida inlets. But then as the tide goes on, you slowly start to transition into darker colors. So our go-to is purple haze toward the end of the tide. Like a lot of people are scared to fish purple. For some reason, I don't know why, but it's the first thing I'm grabbing. It seems to trigger the bigger fish. You might not get as many bites per se, maybe with like a white or a more common color, but for some reason, it seems like you get a better fish on a darker color. I mean, and maybe that's just because I'm fishing it more than any other color, but it just seems to be the recipe for success.
I've seen it happen plenty of times with bass fishing. You're flipping a natural jig or a light colored jig, you're catching a whole bunch of fish, but you switch to something black and dark, you're catching less fish and they're all bigger. That's a lot of bass fishermen will relate to that. I've seen it plenty of times.
Yeah, and I know, Jose, too, you brought up, and a lot of our limited batches are based on the translucency of certain colors. So maybe break it down to everyone, like why are, you know, you're so particular in having translucency with certain baits for certain parts of your fishing.
It's a little bit about what we've been talking about, is when do you want to use a certain bait for a certain situation. And then we'll focus on making natural, and this is Brandon, making these natural profiles more opaque than most other baits. So when you have that natural profile, you kind of want it, like we said, to blend in. Like the sand croaker, it has kind of a sand kind of color to it, a little bit of a blue sheen. When you're fishing this on the beach or a jetty in an inlet, it's very natural. It looks kind of contoured like the background that you have. And then if you ever look at baitfish in the water, you really have to like start dialing your eyes in properly to actually even see those small fish that are blending in with the bottom. And that's ideally what you're trying to mimic when you're doing a very translucent bait with a natural profile. And then you could go with a perfect example is you'll see these pinks, and pinks end up being like a natural color, you know, but they're both very opaque. They're both very translucent. Even though you see a solid color here, the pigment isn't really as solid as you think. If you hold it up to the light, you could start seeing through the pigment, and you could see, you know, that somewhat disappears in the water column as well. So pink is really great when you're looking for like a natural situation. You want a bait that contrasts from the bottom, but in a very natural profile, and you kind of want to make it clear. And I'll have Brandon talk more about that as well. But so this is a fun one, murder mullet. We kind of did a little bit of a blend of both on this. So the top color is very opaque, but then the bottom color has a translucency to it. And sometimes blending that, you know what I mean? You're fishing kind of like some intermediate, like some water that's a little bit in between, because it's never all the way dirty and it's never all the way clean. So you're fishing something that's not as dirty as usual, or a lit up situation that you don't want. You don't have to contrast it against the background as much. And you could use something a little bit more translucent, like Voodoo Vince, that's one of his favorite colors. He does really well with that. Even with like the Coronas, whenever you see like a natural profile, you're gonna see that you can see through the bait. This one's very translucent. It looks bright in the surface, but once you bring this 10 feet under the water and you put it along the bottom, it starts disappearing. And that's kind of what you want with the natural profiles.
Translucency.
Yes. That means being invisible.
I'm just going to take you guys into my mind.
All right, let's get it.
This is how I think about it. If you look at everything in nature, a cheetah or anything, or even a mutton snapper, everything's trying to blend into its surroundings. Mutton snapper, you bring it out of the water, it looks beautiful and pink and orangish, and they look beautiful. But when that fish is down there 50, 80, 100, 150 feet, that thing is gray and camouflaged. You could barely see them.
Yeah.
That thing is morphing into its surroundings. It's blending right in. And when I look at pilchards, even baitfish, it's the same thing. That thing's swimming around with mirrors on it, trying to blend into its surroundings. And it's those snook are there hunting, just feeling for vibration. And I try to take that into mind when developing and making these colors, like Miami Ice, Creamsicle,
Sand Croaker.
Sand Croaker. Like all these are natural sheens that are still look like the sand or the water color tone of a croaker, but with an iridescent bluish sheen that it looks very naturally blending into its surroundings. So I just know snook are super stealthy hunters. They like when it's extremely rough out, water's super white, dirty, and they know that, and they know they could go out and feed and actually have the one up on sneaking by a croaker or a pilchard or a mullet. They move out when it's rough or dirty water. That's their time to feed.
And you see the bait fish change colors, like mullet.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen mullet with every different color back you could think of, and silver mullet that are darker, have a light green back, have a dark green back, have a brown back, black. Like they kind of change with the watercolor. You'll see a mullet that's traveling on the ocean or on the mullet run. It's a completely different color than when it's in the backwaters or you catch it by its spillway. Like these fish, and with the mullet, they get that gold sheen when they're in that dark bronze water, and sometimes that's what you need in your bait to get bit because they want to be relevant to that. And then out in the ocean where you have just a silver mullet and they're ocean clean, like a light hue on their back. They're almost all silver. It's a completely same thing with mud minnows. Something is a mud minnow caught on a sand flat. They're like super light and translucent, and then you catch them over grass patches and they're dark and barred,
brown and green and purples and
yep. And I don't know how quick they change colors, but they definitely adapt to their environment to kind of camouflage in the background. And that's kind of what you're mimicking when you're fishing that clear water situation. You want to mimic that bait fish to make it kind of translucent, transparent, make it blend in with the background. And it makes it that natural presentation that gets those fish to bite, especially finicky fish in clear water.
Yep.
And then, that's translucency. Now, when we're talking about a very solid color, I know we touched upon it a little bit earlier, but kind of let's get in your mind.
Get into my head.
Brandon Snookin's head on very solid color, because I know purple's one of your favorites.
Yes, it is. So, again, think like a snook. The snook are on the bottom, and they're looking up.
So you mean in your head, you think like a snook?
Right now, look, I'm looking up. I'm looking up. Nah. So, like, you're outside, it's nighttime, it's dark. But if you go and look up at the sky, and sometimes you'll see a plane fly by, you can still see the silhouette of a plane. Even though that plane's white, it's looking black because it's so dense and it's not see-through. It's actual white plane, but it's so dense you're seeing black against a white nighttime sky. And that's why I like to fish a lot of times is like a darker bait, because those snook are on the bottom looking up, and that darker purple haze or dark horse color is just standing out, and you can see that silhouette perfectly. If you're fishing like a sand croaker color that's very translucent, you're not going to get that hard silhouette.
Yeah.
It'll be hard for you to trace out that lure if you're looking up and it's clear versus a purple haze or a dark color. They could perfectly trace it out.
Yeah, and the big thing that we're talking about here is the fact that there's a lot of pigment and it's dense. Because you could do that. Technically, you could do that with the white bait.
Oh yeah.
Like you could make it as dense as possible with its pigment. That way it's casting a shadow almost the same way. We typically do that with the darker baits because we want to blend it in with the background, but create that contrasting, silhouette that it's basically a backdrop against any kind of light that might be up there. And it sounds crazy, but the less light there is out, the more it matters.
Oh yeah.
The more it matters how solid that color is against the background.
We seen it like 2 years ago. We were fishing off the beach and it was dark out. And the only thing they were eating was that little 3-inch dark horse, that black one. And they were smoking it. We were trying white, chartreuse, could not get a bite. And it was just that dark horse that was the ticket.
And that's on the beach in clear water.
Yep.
Clear water. It was a little dirty.
Which a black bait is the most unnatural thing swimming by. But to them looking up, you bring it right past them. They see the silhouette and they just commit to it right away.
That was it. And that was the ticket. And we saw that this year too.
Yeah.
We saw the dark colors working really well
in
the clear water. So that's, you can't just go always by the rule of thumb. Like, clear water, I have to use a translucent bait. It has to do with the situation, what's happening, how they're feeding, what the moon is doing. Is it really light out? Is it dark? All that makes the difference. And
that's why, like we talked about, people asking what's your favorite color? In my mind, colors always last to me. First is silhouette. What bait are they eating? What size is it? Let me match that size. Then it's cadence. And where in the water column am I fishing? Once you have the bait profile down, the water column they're feeding it on, then you got to dial in the cadence. Do they want it fast? Do they want it medium pace? Do they want it crank, stop, crank, stop? Do they want it just slowly sweeping? Once you dial those in and you get a couple bites, then it's time to dial in color. And then you could really fine tune it. A lot of times sometimes that's how I get extra 3 or 4 bites a night, is once you dial in those first, then it's color.
And that's why I suck, because I just go to color first.
Damn, I shouldn't have said that.
And then I see what Brandon's doing, and then I dial it in that way.
That's how I look at it. It's always profile, cadence, then color.
I'm glad you're always looking at it, because I fish with you a lot. And I could just copy your homework there. But actually, I say, that I do that, but I always try to do something different. And if you're throwing a light color, I'll throw a dark. But every once in a while.
And it works. Sometimes I'm going through everything I know how to go through, and I'm looking at Jose, and he's getting smoked. I'm like, I don't get it.
I just say, ask me. Ask me what I'm using.
And I do, and I go, what color are you throwing? What size jig head?
And I say, can't tell you.
But we all have our own little ways of dialing it down and going through our book of fishing notes that we have mirrored in our head, and we all have our own little ways.
Yeah, everybody does it different.
How to get a bite Snook list.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, everybody does it different.
How to get a bite checklist.
I see Ben kind of go through it a little bit differently. I go through it a little differently. I see the way you go through it methodically. No, Ben is a very methodical dude too. But kind of breaking down how you guys look at it and what you're choosing for why, and then I'll just be like the dark horse in there and just throw something completely different or off, just to see. Like, I always look at it like, the bigger the net, the more the fish, more chances we have of trying to crack that code, especially if we haven't been out there often. Like, if you're going out there from a week or two off of fishing,
you got to figure things out.
Yeah, you better take a bunch of rods with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You better have your grocery list of lures for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
So talking about what we're looking at, like how we approach color, I think you kind of went a little bit deeper on how you're approaching the situation. Like, what are you looking like in rods? Like, I know what setups, but I want to get you to talk about what kind of setups. What do you typically have with you when you get on the boat or you're going fishing? Like, what's your setup range?
If I had to pick, I mostly fish with 2 setups. That's all I really need is 2 different rods. One's a 8-foot for like a 4 or 5K setup. I could cover a 3-inch or a little mullet on that setup, and my other setup is either a heavy bait caster or a heavy spinner. That I could fish a 5-inch paddle tail or an 8-inch paddle tail or a big mullet or a big K-tail.
Can I just be the guy that asks questions?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to be the guy. So why are you using the spinner over the bait caster typically? Like, I know you're picking either or for a big bait, but why do you want to fish one or the other?
Depending the weather and how much a wind is out, that plays a huge role. So if it's really windy, I like to fish a spinner. I could pick up my line quicker. I could feel a little bit better. My line's a little bit thinner.
Mm-hmm.
My 9-foot bait caster will have 40 or 50 pound braid, where therefore my bait casters I'll have 65 or 80. A little bit thicker. The wind picks it up. The current grabs it better, a little more, so it's harder to feel. But usually my 4 or 5K setup, I'll have an 8-foot medium heavy rod. Medium heavy rod. And then my bait caster would either be an 8-foot or 8.6 heavy setup. That thick braid, I could stop them. If they're eating big baits, I could turn that fish and I could handle that fish. Going back to the 8-foot spinner, I'll have 20 pound braid. 20 pound, we found out, is like that's the sweet spot for that 3-inch paddle tail. You cast it really far, cuts through the wind, and it just gets down in the current, and you could really feel that bait really good. But 8-foot spinner, 20 pound braid, that's the ticket. If you're around heavy structure, we'll bump it up to 30 or 40 pound braid on a little bit heavier, extra heavy 8-foot 8-foot spinning rod that we can really stop the fish. But it's 2 rods. It's an 8-foot spinner and an 8.5 foot bait caster, or a 9-foot spinning rod. That's all. I could cover every lure that we make with those setups.
Yeah, and the to reiterate for the folks that Joey mentioned, on the boat or by land, the 9-foot spinners typically from land, and then you downsize your rod in length when you're on the boat, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you're saying that you fish 2 rods, why do you take 10 every time you go fishing?
Because they fit on the
boat.
boat.
You take 10. I take like 5.
All right.
They fit on the boat now.
Yeah. If you got the room, might as well fill them up.
Yeah. No, but when you do go land-based fishing, you're 2 rods.
2 rods is max is what I need.
And it depends. Like, it's going to be the 9-foot heavy spinner or the big bait caster, and then you're always going to have an 8-foot 3-inch rod.
If, let's say I know where the fish are, I know where they're biting, I know I'm going to get there at that certain time when they're biting, I'll take a second bait caster for backup. In case it breaks or my rod snaps, I could still fish. But 2 rods is all you really need. Yeah. And if I'm there and I don't know when the fish are biting, and I'm going to go there 2 hours before I know when they might be biting, I'll take 2 rods of 2 different weight setups. So I'll have a heavier jig head because the current's ripping a lot harder. That way I don't even want to cut my line to retie to when I got to go lighter to keep fishing. I'll just switch out my rods, grab my other rod real quick, and keep fishing.
We all know you don't like to retie.
Yeah. 5-inch leaders get smoked.
Yes, that's true. So setups, kind of covered that. Baitcaster wise, what are you usually? Nah, I don't even want to start talking about
going into the rods.
No, but we know where we could go down the rabbit holes. But
I think if you're going to stay on the topic of color, you can talk about like bridge fishing versus inlet fishing, moon versus non-moon, if you can take it like a step further.
Yeah, I don't want to lose my Shimano sponsorship, so I'm not going to mention anything about rods or reels. All right, I want to preserve that one. So what'd you say, moon? Yeah, you can't fire me. What do we got?
Well, Ben brought up where like fishing scenarios, fishing the inlet, fishing around a bridge, fishing around a dock light. Let's say it's a full moon. Anywhere you go, it's going to be bright. Let's say it's dark out, new moon. You go near a bridge and you got bridge lights out.
It'll be like the couple hours in the night, it's still bright, and then it goes dark, and you got to switch it up completely.
100%. But let's say it's bright out. You could be out near an inlet, and you could look at the person right next to you and see what's on their hat or what t-shirt they're wearing. Some nights you can't even see what's in front of your face.
And the clouds really make a big difference.
Oh yeah,
that's something I've been checking over the last couple of years when we're going out. It's just cloud cover.
It could be Jose's 100% right. It could be a new moon. It could be cloudy above you, and those city lights are just bouncing off the cloud cover. And it'll look like the moon's out super bright, and there is actually no moon around.
Absolutely.
And that plays a huge role in picking colors.
I know Trevor loves filming during new moons.
Yeah, he does.
When it's cloudy.
No, but I think like almost to break it down, like every night is different, right? Every night of the moon is different. You have different ambient lights for every specific scenario, right? So like a lot of our people that are probably listening to this are going, well, I'm a bridge fisherman, so that doesn't apply to me. I don't really fish the inlet as much as you guys. I'm a bridge guy. Well, it's just as important for you as it is for the guy who's fishing the inlet, right? Because you have a full moon and you have the ambient light from the street lights on the bridge.
And it's overhead.
And it's not overcast. You basically have not twice the light. I don't really know what the number is, but you have more light going into the water.
Yeah.
So let alone if the water is a tannic at the end of the tide, if it's crystal clear incoming, you're going to have to probably go to a color. And
it's definitely a measurable difference.
There is a huge difference in that. So I know personally when I'm fishing, if it's a little bit more see-through, or not see-through is the wrong word, but let's say the water's more transparent, it's in the middle of the tide, let's say it's the middle of the incoming, I'm going to resort to more transparent colors than I am towards solid colors in that scenario.
I'll give a perfect example of what you're saying. Like, even if you're a bridge fisherman, it actually makes a lot of difference, because there's some places where we like to fish on a new moon because you're getting a harder shadow line casted across the entire bridge. Whereas if you're fishing that same bridge on a full moon, that shadow line isn't as distinct because you have all that ambient light around.
It would actually, sorry to interrupt you, but it could actually cause two shadow lines where that moon's on an angle.
Yep.
You have the light shadow line from the bridge, and you also have the moon shadow line from the bridge, and it's a lot further back, and you'll actually get fish hanging out on both shadow lines.
So yeah, you can't say it doesn't matter. It makes a huge difference.
Huge.
Whether you're fishing around ambient light or not, if you're looking at the details, there's a huge difference in the way that you approach it fishing a new moon. There's some bridges that we only want to go on the new moon.
Yeah.
And some bridges that we fish on the full moon overhead.
We tried telling Bobby that, but he doesn't listen.
Come on, Bobby Diaz.
Bobby, it's full moon. Do not go.
Stay on the lake. No, but in all seriousness, I think that's more of a, we've been doing it for quite some time, so it's a little bit more advanced, you can say, once you get into that habit of light and moons and tides and where you're at, but it's the subtle differences that might make that difference of you getting bit once, twice, or 10 times, right?
Sure.
From color, to say the least.
Are you imagining you're a snook right now, just looking at the bait? That's what Brandon does all day in his office, so you guys know. He just fucking swims packs over his head and watches them.
With the lights out.
With the lights out. Sometimes speaking of which, not that I want to go back to chartreuse, but I fucking just love chartreuse. Tell us a little bit,
You tell us.
Yeah, what's the Jose experience?
Yeah, you know. Why do I got to tell you?
I love chartreuse. Let me tell you all about it. All right, this is one of my favorite colors. My kid's room is painted straight chartreuse. I have a chartreuse ram sitting outside.
The front door is orange.
This toothbrush is chartreuse.
Cops can't see chartreuse, so I paint all my cars chartreuse. It's one of the only colors out there that actually emits ultraviolet light, which is pretty cool. I didn't know that until a couple years ago. Yeah. You schooled me up on that. And so technically fish can see in the ultraviolet spectrum, something that we cannot.
Some fish, the predatory, some fish that are predators.
That's why I asked for you to explain this. But yeah, that's something about chartreuse, right? Like we're all saying, and what we were talking about earlier, there's something about that color. There's no bait fish that you go out there and see that's chartreuse, but it's doing something. And snook and tarpon are some of the species that can see ultraviolet spectrum of light. And, we can't see it, but it is emitting an ultraviolet spectrum, and that's kind of why it shines against the black light. If you look at any of those colors that we've had in the videos that are shining and glowing against a black light, that's because it's reflecting back an ultraviolet light spectrum. So a lot of those fluorescent colors, what they like to say, like what the hotheads that we did with the hotheads, those fish underwater, that's something that's kind of transcending the water column. It's almost like a glow to a fish that they could see that increases the chances for the fish to see it, or blend in like a bait fish that also may be emitting an ultraviolet light that we don't see, because fish have ultraviolet light on them. And some of the colors, we can't see it. They're communicating with each other through ultraviolet light that they emit. A lot of the tropical fish and cichlids and stuff like that. But, you know, it's relevant to our type of fishing. So some of those far out colors, like a hot pink, a blaze orange, chartreuse, those are colors that emit ultraviolet light that we're not even aware of and we can't see. So that was talking about chartreuse. I just wanted to go back to that. That was something we didn't mention, but I think is really worth mentioning, because, you know, I didn't know about that till 5 or 6 years ago.
You said it. There's a reason why it works, and that could be a really good reason why it works. So
I think it has a lot to do with that.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the kids nowadays are matching their lures to their sneakers. Right? Chartreuse sneakers, chartreuse lures.
Yeah.
I've done that once or twice. I do have a chartreuse hat.
Damn, this was good. I'm excited to see this. We could do some dope podcasts in the future.
Yeah, this is just part one, and I'm already whispering into the mic.
Maybe go into to say, let us know what you guys want to talk about.
Oh yeah, thank you, Trevor. He's a producer / videographer / photographer / editor / digital creator.
Does color matter?
So in the future, we want to do this more often. I think we want to get a couple, you know, rolling and just kind of get the cobwebs out. Or fuck cobwebs. We've never even been here. Just really just get our feet wet and do a few. But in the future, we definitely want to hear what you guys want to talk about. Any subjects or, you know, really anything under the sun. Even no live bait needed questions. How we started. Why did we start? Where did we get our baits? Like, you guys let us know what you want to hear, and we'll be here to talk about it. At least try to do something once a week, if not twice a month.
Yeah.
But this is pretty cool.
It is.
Yeah, this is the talk shop right here, right? That's why we do this. We make fishing lures, but a lot of people forget or we don't forget why we do it, right? Because Brandon sits here and Jose sits here on at work, and you guys build it because you guys know it's a certain situation that you need that lure for. So people might just see it as a color, but it's a little bit further than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Limited batch, it's like an opportunity for us to be able to have done hundreds of colors that we think, you know, and I think it's an unlimited amount of colors that we would want for different fishing situations, even just sub-variants of other colors, like a tarpon toothpaste. I want to make one a little bit lighter, one a little bit darker. The Corona, I could do one a little bit more translucent. A murder mullet that's more dense, you know, so it does have a dark background. You know, all the silvers, all the grays, blacks, whites, translucent, solid whites, translucent whites. I mean, it just goes on and on. Natural baitfish colors, super contrasting colors like our sheesh and, you know, the cotton candy that we made, and there's just a sour batch, our own variation of electric chicken, which is just, you know, a little bit darker greens, a little bit more solid pink. We wanted something more contrasting. It's an unlimited amount of variations that we could do. There's offshore guys that ask us, like flying fish, like really cool things that we could do. Not limit ourselves to just our standard 4 or 5 products that we could get out there, but be able to offer probably more colors than anybody has ever offered in fishing lures. And then, you know, you'll find that a certain lure that's working in a situation, and you mug them on it, and people are asking to buy packs from you, and you're just the only one smoking them on them. We always hook everybody up if we're fishing with the crowd, but I've heard of that situation hundreds of times, and it's pretty cool to see, you know, people get dialed in on what color, why, and understand the importance of having that spectrum of colors, because if they are dialed in on something, I mean, you got it to cover it. And that's the difference between going out catching fish or maybe even watching somebody next to you catch fish. And that's pretty cool. That's why we did this. Brandon, you wanna exit the conversation?
Brandon's drinking mullet juice right now, so you guys know.
Procure.
Procure.
No, you summed it up great.
All right, guys, now Trevor has a list of homework for us to do, so we got to go. See you guys next time. We're going to have to do some voiceovers, just letting you guys in on some inside stuff.
You got to hit the button, Trevor. Hit it.
Yeah.
Hit it.
Do I have to hit the GoPro button?
No. Hit the...
See you later. Goodbye.
The music button. Hold on, guys. And there we go. Join us next week when we talk about K-tails.